Thanks for tuning in. Our thanks again to Dr. Jennifer McVeigh of the Dent Institute for joining us to talk about TBI. She's an expert in post-concussion syndrome and traumatic brain injury and helps set the stage for where we're going in this conversation, because somebody might say, so Carolyn Johnson is a TBI survivor. What is TBI? And Jennifer McVeigh did a great job explaining some of what that looks like. But Carolyn, welcome to NBL. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This conversation's been a long time coming. I think it was about 91 years ago that you said, I'd love to come on and talk about TBI.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry it's taken so long. But
God's timing.
Yeah. But grateful that you're here. And, you know, one of the things, we want to talk about real life here on this program, and there's various aspects to life. There's parenting and there's finances and all that stuff.
Right.
But sometimes there's injuries and overcoming them. And you're a TBI survivor.
Yes.
Looking at you, no one would know that, right?
Right.
But that's part of the problem,
That's
right?
That's it, because it's a hidden injury, and it affects every aspect of life, like you mentioned, finances, relationships, your job, your career. You're sidelined, and everything has changed. You know, your whole world is flipped upside down.
Let me ask you something practical before we go on. I'm going to call you Carolyn, but on the books it says C. Ray
C.
Johnson.
Ray Johnson. I use my middle name.
Ray is R-A-E. So should I call you C. Ray or?
That'd be great.
Really?
Well, either anything.
Okay. Well, we got C. Ray Johnson with us, R-A-E. And the first letter is the letter C. C. Ray Johnson, author of a whole bunch of books. And by the way, writing's kind of been a therapy for you, right?
It has. It has. I've always been a little dabbler in writing, like a closet writer, but with this injury, it really gave me the time to sit down and write, and God really placed it on my heart that I needed to do this.
Well, you've written a whole bunch of books. I'll let you describe more of them later, one of them dealing with autoimmune disease and fibromyalgia. By the way, you're a registered nurse.
I was an LPN. I'm not working in the field right now due to the injury. It was hard to get work afterwards because when you're symptomatic, it's hard enough with your own life, and you don't want to put anybody else at risk. Right. On the job.
Okay, but then two other books that deal directly with TBI. One's called Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI, and Post-Concussion Syndrome.
Yes.
Do's and Don'ts, a personal journey. So we'll ask you about some of that. And then the other one, dealing also with TBI and post-concussion syndrome, 10 simple steps your doctor may not know that can help you. And this is all kind of based on your own personal experience, right? So first of all, you just mentioned being symptomatic. I asked Dr. McVeigh earlier, can you get healed from TBI? Does it ever go away? Or is it something you're more likely to experience symptoms from periodically throughout your life?
I think everybody.
What's your experience been?
I think everybody is different. I myself, I still struggle with certain symptoms. It all depends on so many factors: your age, if you're female, if you had prior head injuries, where you were hit, the impact of the hit, the force, what lobe. I myself, was hit on the side of the head, so it affected several lobes, and it affected me in ways, obviously, different types of headaches and pressure, and it disrupted my hormones. It affected me cognitively. It had a lot of mental fogginess. I still have memory challenges. I'll still forget if I leave the stove on, so I have to make sure I am there. In the room, it affects visual disturbances, sound. It seemed to heighten, for me, my senses. My sense of smell is heightened. Bright lights, fluorescent lights are bothersome. Sounds, it made it difficult to go in a store or a restaurant or any type of setting, even a school especially, where there is movement and sounds and different pitches of voices, because it becomes overwhelming and your brain picks up everything. So it's trying to decipher everything that's going on. In a restaurant, you have the chatter of people talking and the clanging of the dishes, the forks, the cups, and so forth. And it just is so overwhelming that you become symptomatic, and your brain starts to shut down less important functions like your speech and your mobility. And for me, I would tip and be off balance, affected my proprioception, so I didn't really know where I was in time and space. I could tell that
kind of like
you're in a dream state.
Disconnected from reality.
Yeah, sure. Like I could look at my hands. I know they were mine, but they didn't feel like mine. They were kind of in a wave, that type of thing. When I would walk, everything, you don't realize how intricate your brain is, and just picking up everything, the sights and smells while you're walking, plus what you're walking on. The pavement, is it wet? Is it snow covered? Is it leaf covered? Anything comes into play, because your brain's trying to figure out how to place your next footing so you don't trip or slip.
Sure.
And there's so many things that are affected. It can change your moods. For me, I would be. Some people become angry. It depends on where they're hit in their head. But for me, I would have sudden bouts of crying because I would become overwhelmed and I just couldn't handle it. And it's just your way of your body kind of adjusting and shutting everything down. I would need that place to go where there was just nothing, just complete quiet. And
so there's a lot of people listening right now wondering what happened to you. How did your traumatic brain injury occur? And I don't know how much you can say about that, but
well, mine was probably quite a bit different than what normally somebody might think. It wasn't from a car accident or a sports injury or anything like that. It was just very innocent. We have a couple larger dogs, and they were playing chase in the house. Our house is set up so they could just run around in a loop. I just happened to bend down at that moment in time to pick up my son's toy, and the larger of the two just hit me in the side of the head and flipped my whole body around. And he seemed to be flipped around a little bit as well. And it was just right above my temple, that whole area, and his head is just like a rock. I just flipped. So I didn't lose consciousness or anything, but I saw all red, and I had a problem with my jaw afterwards. I noticed I went the long way around to try to get my bearings, go to the bathroom, check in the mirror, but I couldn't really visually focus on myself. I had trouble eating, and I did what you shouldn't do. I waited 3 days to go to the hospital just to see, because I always felt like I'll be fine,
Well, because honestly, most people who maybe, bump into their dog in the house aren't thinking that they might have something as serious as traumatic brain injury going on, but
sure,
it was fairly forceful collision, right?
It was a forceful collision, and you think your head inside there's a lot of bony protrudence in the skull, and you figure if your brain is like Jello in a way, and it just bounces and ricochets off of these bony, sharp protrudence in the skull, and you can have damage to your neurons and your axons. It can be stretched, and just all this going on. And sometimes it takes time for symptoms to develop. But my speech was slowing, and I still had trouble walking, and I didn't know where I was, and I was just completely out of it. It was time to go.
So 3 days later,
3 days,
you went to the emergency room?
I went to the ER. Yep.
What prompted that? Because you weren't feeling better in 3 days?
I wasn't feeling
really?
right, and he could tell. I was just crying, just overwhelmed. I felt like I wasn't really there, physically. I was like half of the way in my life, like I was in a dream constantly. Yeah. And the headaches too. I would get severe bone-crushing headaches. It felt like I was having a brick pressed down from the top of my head, and then I would feel like I would have like a rod going through, and it felt like my face was wet, like it was just something dripping, but it wasn't. It was just all these weird sensations.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like, at least initially, how long did that last? You said you went to the ER at 3 days, but did it begin to subside in a week or a month?
No, it was getting worse, and then I went to a concussion specialist, and then they also said I had whiplash too, and I went for vestibular therapy, and that helps with your balance and your proprioception issues, and I was doing all the therapy with that, and I was actually recovering, but then I had that second impact that the person that was on before the doctor was talking about, because you have to be careful. And it's very minor, really, if you think about it, because most people think you need another severe hit, but you really don't. When your brain's already injured, the slightest movement can injure it again. And there were a couple things with one of the other dogs. We were just goofing around with him on the floor, and just tipped back with him, jumping on me, just tapped my head lightly on the back, but that was enough to slow me down, and we had a gym at the time, and with working out, I was used to working with working out heavily, with using heavy equipment, And what I started noticing is when I had my head lower than my body, and how the blood usually rushes to your head, it was applying too much pressure. And I used to flip tires and everything with my husband with our fitness, and that was applying too much pressure. So the increased head pressure, intracranial pressure, was bringing my symptoms on again, and it was all of a sudden the two together spiraled, and I was back at square one again. And they also diagnosed with a post-concussion syndrome too in the beginning, but it came back. So I was back at the doctors again, like from square one.
As you understand it, and it wasn't even entirely clear when I talked to Dr. McVeigh, I should have probably pressed this issue a little bit, but as you understand it, is there a difference between post-concussion syndrome and traumatic brain injury, and which you're saying you had TBI, but were you also experiencing the effects of post-concussion syndrome?
Yes,
so how's that?
It was lingering, for sure. I would go to a couple doctors, and unfortunately, a couple of the ones I went to, they thought it should have been healed within 2 weeks. But I'm finding with myself and a support group page that I started, there's so many people on there. They have problems years, well into some of them 10, 12, and above years, still struggling with post-concussion syndrome symptoms that you feel like when you get symptomatic, you almost feel like you're in the beginning stages of your injury. You have these symptoms. You can feel fine in your normal surroundings, your home or wherever you're at, but once you get into another environment, like you walk into a store or a gathering where there's a few people, you realize that you're not healed yet. Or if you do too much the day before, it affects you with your healing, and you're more symptomatic.
Okay, so I got to ask you the elephant in the room question. You mentioned the word healing, and there are many wonderful believers in the body of Christ who believe that if you just have enough faith, you can always be healed on the spot, that God kind of has to, whatever we bind on earth, or bound in heaven, loosed on earth, loosed in heaven, and I fully believe, just so you know, that God can heal, and I've seen him heal in the past. But has anyone tried to tell you that maybe you don't have enough faith, or maybe there's hidden sin in your life because you're not healed yet? And where do you, not so much, we don't really want to talk about healing, but how has this played out in your own life? Because you're a believer, you certainly pray and ask for God to deliver you, but it sounds like you're still dealing with the symptoms.
I still do deal with a few, and I know God can heal you, and he's shown me in the past with other things I went through. I had I'll just mention briefly, I had a giant cell tumor before, where when they went to do the surgery, he did heal that. I had all new bone growth, so he does do that, and he has healed me through this. But I think God he allows things to happen in your life for a reason, and ultimately to give him glory. And how do you give him glory? Is you can help other people. A lot of people initially will say to me, they feel so bad and this and that, but I'll always respond, no, please don't, because I don't mind, having the injury, because I've learned so much. Not so much that, it's helped me grow as a person. I've become closer to Christ through it. Just little things with starting this Facebook group. So many people are on there and able to interact with each other. They could get on and they can vent, bounce ideas off of each other, what helps them. So God allows things for a reason, and it doesn't have to do with sin or anything, but it's ultimately to bring others closer to him. For what you go through and the comfort he gives you, you're better able to comfort somebody else.
So you're experiencing not only the symptoms of TBI and working your way through that. You believe God's in the process of healing you, but using you to bring glory to him through it all.
Yes, I do believe so.
So your injury has in some ways become a ministry. It
has. It's become just a growing ministry for me. Like I said, he's enabled me to write through it. Initially, after I had the injury, I now with my brain before, I don't know if it's with every female, but I always have like almost like an overactive brain. You know,
I'm going to be careful however I respond to whatever you're about to say. Okay, go ahead.
You know, I'm always thinking, my brain's very active, always thoughts popping in. But after the injury, it just went blank. I like did not have a thought in my head at all. So in the healing process, when I would lay down to nap, I would have a series of recurring dreams where, I believe God was meeting me in these dreams. And in my dream, there was a boat, and I would go onto the boat, and it was Peter at the helm. I'd get on, and there was the Lord, and I would lay down, and he would hold my head. And initially, I thought he was healing my head. But we would go down this channel, and each consecutive dream, there would be a storm coming. And each one, the storm would get worse. First it was foggy, then we come back, and then I get back into another dream again the next day. And, each time it was different until the last series of the dreams that the storm was so bad that, in the dream, Peter would tell me a storm is coming very urgently. But as I was notion to look in the water in the stream, there were like these tadpoles, but they were like had human faces, and it was placed on my heart that with all these lost people, souls out there looking for help, looking for Christ, and in the dream Peter had said, let's go fishing. And so I woke up from those series of dreams, never had them again. But it was just placed on me. I need to reach out through my writing, get back into the writing, because it was years since I've really dabbled with it, and write. But at that time, I was thinking, how can I do this? I had a brain injury. I can't talk. If I write words on the paper, I was writing 2 or 3 words, my penmanship. I couldn't look at a computer or a TV because my brain would pick up the lighting and the pixels behind it, and I couldn't function. So how am I going to write these books? But years later now, God just showed me as I would get on to start writing that it was therapy for me. If I was doing on task for him, research and putting in the books, it was healing for me, and I was able to stand. If I veered off, it would bother me too much, and I would have to get off. So I think he's placed this on me to do as a ministry.
How long ago was your injury?
The May of 2014.
Okay, so I'm doing the math in my head. A little over 4 years ago. Still struggling with symptoms bit?
A few. I am so much better. I still struggle a little bit, well, like I said, with the memory at times. I have parts of my memory I just don't remember. And then there's other things I'll try not to forget. So I'll find myself repeating because I don't want to forget, and I'll have notes all around so I don't forget. I still have a little bit of proprioception problems. They're
Which means
better.
What?
Where your body's trying to realize where it is in time and space. So things lots of times in the car, but I am getting better with that too. Other cars will seem closer. So if they put the brake lights on, I would jump thinking that I'm going to hit. And it wasn't even a car accident. But to me, everything seemed closer. I go in spurts. I get headaches. I don't, but they're not as bad as they were. So the healing process, I really have come a long way. And it's very minor now. Sounds would get to me, but I have these high-fidelity earplugs that help in situations, and they are really great for anybody that struggles with this to bring with you and to wear because they block out pitches of sound that can be bothersome.
Right. One last thing before our break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the content of the book and stuff like that, now that we've heard your story. But I remember watching, by the way, I must have been linked into the Concussion Syndrome Facebook page somehow because I'm getting notifications like they're going out of style, which is cool because I'm hearing the stories of other people and able to look at it. So I don't know how I got connected to it, but I'm grateful that I am. And it's just kind of cool to see what's happening in the lives of others because I've heard your story, obviously. And my dad is a TBI survivor, having been hit by a car and thrown on his head at the age of 11. He's going to be 91, so for 80 years he's been dealing with TBI. Unbelievable. But on one of the Facebook posts that you and your husband, I don't know if it was John that posted it or you, said something like, I don't know, it's going back about a year ago, that there was a time where your speech got slower, and that you were being, I'll call the word episodic, like you were having an episode, and I just wonder if you could relate what happened in there. I don't know if you remember that post or not, but he was drawing attention to the fact that you were really having a hard time and needed to slow down and get through that moment. But do you remember what was going on there?
I did have several of those moments because that's how too much stimuli would affect me. My speech would just slow right down, and it would be hard for me to talk. I would get stuck on syllables trying to pronounce the words, and then I even knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't quite find the right word. Is like it was stuck in my head, and I'm trying to pull it out, and I would stutter too. So it made it difficult for communicating with people, and it would frustrate people because they would try to abruptly try to finish your sentence just to get you to hurry up, and you want to say it and you really want to communicate, but it ended up being really hard. So it was easier for me to write what I wanted to say. But then again, I can only fit a couple words on a large sheet of paper because it was just my dexterity to try to make the letters, and they were jagged and crooked. So that would happen whenever I would have too much going on, and it could be from sounds, it could be a lot of other health issues in the body because of the head injury. It all plays a part. And I think for me, my brain would shut my speech down for sure first, and my balance. So I would I would tip to the right all the time. And
I just want to say, for those that are listening, the reason I really thought this was an important conversation to have, well, it's multifaceted. Number one, because God teaches us an awful lot in the valleys that we never learn on a mountaintop. So you've come to know and understand God differently. Your marriage has been enriched through this process, as hard as it's been, and we're going to get a chance to hear some of that. But at the same time, there's some real practical things that people in the body of Christ can do, rather than just coming along and saying, "Hey, snap out of it," or "Why don't you just trust Jesus more and maybe your symptoms would go away?" To have some real compassion and understanding for people who are struggling with TBI, and know that, first of all, there's some real practical things you can do to help deal with it, which you've identified in your book, and including exercise and nutrition and some other things that we're going to highlight today, but very practical suggestions that can make life easier if you're a TBI survivor. So worth talking about for that reason as well. And I just wanted to let all of our listeners know that there's a Christian author who's written on this subject, and her name is C. Ray Johnson. I call her Carolyn, but we'll go with the C period R-A-E, C. Ray Johnson, which is her pen name here, and is author of the book called Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI and Post-Concussion Syndrome. And the other one, and it's about 10 simple steps your doctor may not know that can help you. The other book regarding do's and don'ts, a personal journey, some of the things you want to do or not do if you're a TBI survivor. So also she's written a book called Autoimmune Disease and Fibromyalgia, the Traumatic Brain Injury Connection. Hey, if you have a question or comment or something you want to share about TBI, I'm going to open the phone lines and give an opportunity for those of you to join us. Although I know for sure we're going to be able to fill this time out just with questions related to C. Ray Johnson's book here and about her personal experience. But I want to give you a chance to jump on board if you've got something you want to say or a question you want to ask. So I'm opening the phone lines. It's 800-684-2848, 800-684-2848, or 883-5000. So you've got one book that deals with 10 simple steps your doctor may not know that can help you. Another one is the Do's and Don'ts book, which is highly practical. They both are. And then the other one about the link between TBI and fibromyalgia and autoimmune disease. Now, you're a licensed practical nurse, an LPN, right? Not currently practicing.
Right.
So you're not a world-renowned expert on neurology,
right?
But you've learned a lot through your personal experience.
I have.
And you're saying there's a link between autoimmune disease and fibromyalgia?
There is, because with me, and so often in many cases, when you have a brain injury, you have some real damage going on within the brain, within the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And when that happens is you have this big disconnect. So hormones aren't manufactured correctly. They're not brought to the adrenal glands correctly. And so you can have huge imbalances. You already have a big inflammation going on initially because of your brain injury, but now your body is starting to go through processes of more inflammation where it affects your immune system. So if your adrenal glands aren't pumping out the correct amounts of hormones, say you have, this happened in my case as well, too much estrogen, then you could have something called estrogen dominance in your body, which greatly affects your immune system, and it could throw it into hyperactive in a way to be have an autoimmune going on. And also because how you perceive pain, and that's where fibromyalgia comes in, you may sense pain differently. So something that might be minor to somebody, all of a sudden it could be excruciating. It could feel like needles, glass, that type of thing, because it's how your brain is perceiving everything.
Wow. All right, so you cover that in a book called Autoimmune Disease and Fibromyalgia, subtitled The Traumatic Brain Injury Connection from C. Ray Johnson. By the way, if somebody wants to get a copy of any of your books, you must have a website or something.
Yeah, they could actually, they're at Beacon Christian Bookstore on Military Road, Niagara Falls, New York, lulu.com, Amazon. They're on a lot of online platforms, and crayjohnsonauthor.com. And I do make a donation from proceeds. I have a pastor friend that's in Kenya, and he started an orphanage called Hope's House Kenya, and he has it's hopeshousekenya.org if anybody wanted to check it out. But I will help him out with proceeds to help all those kids.
Okay, so some proceeds from the sale of the books goes to assist in that ministry. All right, let's just talk about some of the simple steps your doctor may not know that can help you. And while there are neurologists who are experts in things like post-concussion syndrome and TBI, like we were talking with Dr. Jennifer McVeigh earlier, when you go see your general physician, they may not be aware of any of the stuff and or have expertise in these areas. So these are like a compilation of things you've learned along the way that can be helpful.
Yes.
And let me just kind of run down, and then we can talk about some of them. But you talk about physical needs, nutrition and supplements, therapies, sound and noise intolerance, sight and light intolerance, memory lapses, exercise, moods and emotions, support groups, and prayer and meditation. So these things, in most of these areas, you've experienced assistance, help, right? It's helped you along in your journey because you've been able to employ some of these things. Let's talk about, just for fun, sound and noise intolerance. You talked about being in a restaurant. There's a lot of noise, the clinking of dishes, the waitress is trying to talk to you, your husband's trying to get your attention. It's noisy, and you're being inundated with this stuff. But as a TBI survivor, it's overwhelming. So what do you do?
It is. It's very overwhelming, and you don't realize just all the little sounds there are. But for me, that worked well with me are these they're earplugs. They could be purchased online. And they're the type of earplugs that musicians use. They're called high-fidelity earplugs, and they black out certain pitches of sound, such as anything high-pitched, children's voices, high-pitched voices, or clanging, certain sounds like guitars or violins, that type pitch, really immediately can send somebody off that is suffering from this to become symptomatic. So with these little earplugs, and they come in a little handy container, you could stick in your pocket, hook to your belt loop, purse, whatever, and you can put them in, and they drown out the noise around you, yet you're still able to talk to who you're with and hear them clearly. So they have been a lifesaver for me.
What if you have a mother-in-law with a high-pitched voice? I'm just... No, I'm kidding. Totally kidding. Okay. But the book deals with real practical things that have helped you. For instance, exercise. Now, you mentioned your husband is kind of a physical trainer. He's into physical fitness, and you've been in the past as well. So what role did exercise play in any of this?
Exercise always played a role in my life, and with this, even more so, because something simple as just walking. And for me, in the beginning stages, I really needed to hang on to my husband because I would tip and go off the path. Right. But just walking, it's aerobic, so it helps you on so many levels. Plus your physical exercise, getting some physical exercise, and it helps with your coordination, with making those neurological connections too. We just keep doing it, and also if you do happen to develop joint soreness or problems with like an autoimmune, say, it helps too with the pain with that, with the flexibility.
What about nutrition and supplements?
And nutrition for sure. Anything that causes inflammation in the body, avoid. Any like white sugars or white flours and so forth. Just make sure you get your omegas in. Lots of things like fish, walnuts, that type of thing. Your B12s. It's good to go have your doctor run some blood work if they haven't in a while after a TBI, because like a complete blood count to see what you're low in. You may be low in vitamin D or magnesium. That could alter your sleep, because a lot of times after this you have trouble sleeping as well. So that can address those issues, and it could also catch early stages of your hormonal levels changing if you do have some damage within your brain, and any beginning symptoms of an autoimmune disease. It'll show up in your blood work as well.
What about memory lapses?
Memory lapses, memory is a huge thing when you have an injury, but just doing there's little tips you can do. For a while, I'll stick notes around, anything I can think of that I didn't want to forget. We rip pieces of paper, whatever, stick it in your coffee pot, highlighters, anything. You could have a bracelet. Yes, I would wear a bracelet, and I would put a jingle bell on there, the type that a kitty cat would wear. So in case you forget you're wearing a bracelet, you still hear the jingle. It's like, okay, like if you were cooking or if you're in the middle of laundry or something, because like in my case, it's very often you would forget because you're so bombarded, and then the next stimuli comes along, and then you're over here and you completely forgot what you were doing over there. So
what I kind of hear, something like Post-it notes or a jingle bell on your wrist, they sound like incredibly simple and practical suggestions,
yeah.
But in a way, what I hear you saying is that it's okay, that you have permission to utilize this kind of stuff to help you through the process of recovering from traumatic brain injury, right? Because somebody might dismiss it like, well, I'd be embarrassed to have to do that. But what I hear you saying is, no, this is therapy, actually. This helps.
It's therapy. It's okay. Even alarm clocks or timers or just anything that's going to help you remember. Memory games, even if you could do crossword puzzles or walk into a room and try to play these little games to increase your memory, visualize what you see in the room and go out of the room and try to remember, and but not to get upset if you can't remember, because you're helping yourself, and you have to give your permission to accept what's happened and to be content where you're at.
In the book that you wrote on do's and don'ts, there's some similar things. Like, for instance, we talked about exercise. Mm-hmm. One of the things you talk about in the do's and don'ts book is you say don't become sedentary, do exercise, but exercise appropriately. And there's an entire chapter on that. But again, there's the support there for the idea that exercise can help. Another one, don't self-destruct, but do care for your body. And you refer to natural remedies there. Mm-hmm. Don't become complacent. Do challenge yourself. That's one of the things I wanted to highlight here, because it seems like even though you've struggled with traumatic brain injury and the ramifications of that you're a bit of a go-getter. And when you finally got back on track writing, you've written like a boatload of books over here. I've got 7 or 8 books at least that you've written. But that idea of challenging yourself, what I see you saying is you can experience change. It may not be total recovery, but you can experience change, and you've experienced some of it.
You can. You have to get comfortable with yourself and get to know the new you. It's a hidden injury. Most people won't understand it. You may lose people in the process. Your friends may go the other way because they will now feel uncomfortable around you. I've experienced that myself. So it's not falling into a despair or a depression with that, but getting to know the new you and knowing that God has you throughout all this, and all things are possible through Him, and in His timing, He will help you through, and you get some really good days where you'll feel like, wow, I'm like completely healed, and you may experience great healing, and you may still struggle with stuff, but that's okay, and it's just accepting where you are at.
We're going to include your husband in the conversation here in a minute, but just before we go, you've talked about prayer in both books and meditation and so forth. And as a believer, you know that God's been with you through this process. So talk about that for a minute, because obviously the Lord Jesus Christ himself has been an assist to you in dealing with traumatic brain injury. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yes. He's with me every moment. When you go through this, you may feel you're all alone because you can't do the same things you used to do. Your whole world is flipped upside down, and when it hits everything, your finances, relationships, everything, it's overwhelming. So it's easy to sink into a depression, but when you have a friend that's always with you and you're not alone, and when you realize that when you're at your bottom, God's right there, you're really, really closest to him. He through me in my life and our experiences, he's always found a way. I mean, our bills, they may get delayed, but they eventually, get paid. We're still in our house. Things do work out. He brings the right people. He will bring the right people into your life. He brought somebody into my life with a home therapy tool I talk about in the autoimmune book that helps with proprioception. It helps with balance. It helps with your lymphatic and limbic system, and they use this tool in therapy offices. It's called the Sand Dune Stepper. And but God brought him to me. I have no idea of this. God can move mountains to get to you, and and he will. And he's a constant source of comfort and help. My healer. At the time, and it's right before my injury, both my husband and myself, we were going to be baptized. We both grew up, Roman Catholic, that kind of thing, but we never had the, even though I believed all along, I never consciously made that choice. Okay, yes, I am going to go make that choice and get baptized in Christ. And that was right around the time of my injury. But I went through, symptomatic, going through the baptism. But right before that, it hits everything. Your relationship's so hard, and the enemy likes to really, and get in there and whisper those lies in your ear. Like, well, what good are you? You can't do this anymore. You can't work. You can't do this. Your family's fighting. Your friends left. You can't pay your bills. We'll whisper in your ear. And for me, God showed up big time. I was in that, desperate, depressive state, fighting going on, where I was starting to believe it, like thinking, well, all right, maybe they'd be better off if I wasn't there. And in my moment where, Christ showed up big time, I mean, I remember being behind two closed doors in my house on the bathroom floor. I had a blade to, an artery, and I was about ready to push in. I mean, I had it there pushing a little bit, and in that last moment of desperation, I cried out, Lord, I don't want to do this. So he met me. He heard my cry, and I heard the dogs bark, and I knew, he showed up that day. So I dropped the knife. I knew the police were there. And how did I know? I don't know. I mean, I was upstairs, behind doors without, not a window in the room. I went downstairs. The police were there. I normally am not comfortable talking with people when I'm symptomatic, but I was so excited that God met me in that place, and I knew everything was going to be okay. And one that was there was a sheriff, and he just didn't seem like like a sheriff. He had his head down, looking the other way, like he was avoiding eye contact, and I tried to engage him, and he didn't really speak to me. And I thought right there, I said, in my mind, thinking, you're not really a sheriff, are you? I mean, I knew God met me there, so I knew God sent me, whoever it was, entertaining angels, I don't know, but when you're at, in your desperation, you cry out, he will meet you right there. He orchestrates everything. So
incredible story. Incredible.
It was going to be okay, and then we went and got through with the baptism. I think it was the following week, and yeah.
Wow. And God's done a great work in your life. If you want a copy of one of these books, we're going to make it available. I want you to call in, and I'll just say, by the way, how much is each book?
They're I might have them discounted on CRayJohnsonAuthor.com, but generally I think the autoimmune was $15.99 and the other two were $14.99. I'll run various sales on there, and they're on Amazon for that price.
Okay, Amazon.com, any book by C. Ray Johnson, or CRayJohnson.com. No, CRayJohnsonAuthor.com, yeah. .com. Okay. Carolyn, C. Ray Johnson, resides in Western New York with her family. She has a medical background in nursing, nutrition, and health and fitness. As a certified personal trainer, she's personally suffered traumatic brain injury and is still dealing with ongoing post-concussion syndrome. This is what it says on the back of the book. Writing has become a way of communication for her with others. C. Ray Johnson loves to share her uplifting, knowledgeable insights that she's learned to help you cope if you're faced with management of TBI or post-concussion syndrome symptoms. So if you want to copy the book, just give us a call here, and one of you will be a winner. Just let us know what about the conversation has been encouraging to you and why you think it could be helpful to you, and we'll give away a copy right here. Don't hesitate. We want to hear from you. It's 800-684-2848 or 883-5000. 800-684-2848 or 883-5000. We'll be back with more of NBL in just a moment. Let me get to Dave here in Toronto real quick. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. So you're listening to the conversation, and I'm wondering, are you or somebody you love TBI survivors?
I'm not a TBI. I'm currently doing cognitive behavioral therapy.
No kidding.
For myself.
All right. So a book like this could be helpful to you in the process, sounds like.
I'm thinking so, because right now I'm kind of really struggling.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hang on. We're going to get your info so that we can send you a copy of the book. But congratulations. And I'm wondering how many people have come to you and said, can you help me because I have TBI or cognitive behavioral therapy or post-concussion syndrome or whatever. Like all of a sudden, what God's been doing in your life becomes an attraction to others, does it not?
It does. And I think it just takes that step of stepping out of your comfort zone and going into the unknown, and, walking by faith. And I've done that online with this group. And there's so many people coming on there, and there's so many more symptoms that I don't even have that they have and they struggle with. And they'll ask questions. And on the group right now, I mean, there's so many people on there that have joined. I even have physicians on there and chiropractors on there because they're all a big part of helping the healing process with somebody that's injured.
And husbands can help you, too.
They can.
John the Rockman Johnson.
Hey, Neil.
Hey, Zach, man, we need a mic here. Thank you. All right, so you've been a part of this healing process as well.
Absolutely.
Learned a few things along the way, maybe?
Many things. I'm probably a prime example of what not to do as a husband.
Oh, I don't think so. I think you've been a great assist to her, and I've seen some of that in the postings on Facebook and stuff. But like even when she was saying that she was struggling to finish a sentence, that you initially were jumping in to finish it for her?
Yes. It's when you first start out and you're trying to, and everything seems whole. You're looking at I'm looking at Carolyn. Everything looks fine, and but then she'll start to stutter. So I would try to help out by finishing the sentences for her, or but she wants to think the process out for herself. So
right.
I would jump in, and a lot of times it'd be so far off base, and that that
creates frustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had to learn the skill of being patient and letting God do the healing and do the work.
God has an amazing way of hitting you where you are weakest.
Yeah.
To show you, hey, you need to improve here. Because, even before the head injury, they're just being the way that I am. I could be very impatient. So with this, I had to really step back and understand what she was going through, even though I looked at my wife and she's still my wife, but there was so much more going on, and trying to understand and relate to that. And that took a while to figure out. And in between all that, the frustration and all that had taken place through that process.
And she's also been a partner to you in personal training and physical fitness and stuff. You guys, for a while, owned a gym. And
yes.
Here she was, unable to really be a full partner at that point, had to back out of some of it. And obviously exercise has helped get her back into the game a little bit. But
yes.
That couldn't have been easy because your partner was struggling.
Absolutely. We would challenge each other with our fitness all the time. And there are certain areas, of course, where I have my strength and she has hers. And she would call me out on those, like abdominals or leg endurance, and she would always increase the workout, and I couldn't keep up. So when that part of my training was taken away, that was hard to deal with too, because every day, at least 5 days a week, we would work out and train together, and that whole aspect was now taken away from me.
And that was intense, where now after a brain injury, you really have to pace yourself, and if you start to notice any symptoms, stop, and weather can have a play in. If it's too hot, that can affect you.
I love your videos, man. John's always posting something. He'll be at some park somewhere. He'll find a 300-pound rock or something, and he'll go, let's see if I can lift it. And then usually you do. It's unbelievable. You've been a huge inspiration and encouragement to me, and
thank you.
Appreciate your friendship. But I'm just wondering, could God make a rock that the rock man can't lift?
I haven't tested all of them out yet.
Wait. If all things are possible with God, then you better think about that before you answer that question. So
I think I'll just plead the fifth on that. I don't know. I'm sure he can.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys coming in to hang with us today. C. Ray, R-A-E, crayjohnsonauthor.com is a website you're going to want to check out. On Facebook, what do you look up?
You look up traumatic brain injury, TBI, and post-concussion syndrome, PCS support group.
Okay.
And just join the page, and we'll add you on.
Okay. It's a way to stay in touch. And, of course, the books are available on Amazon and stuff. Just to mention, some other time we can talk about these, but you've got a book called In the Days of Noah, another one called Freedom is Not Free, Not Now, Not Ever. There's one called The Juniper Tree, another one, Push for Freedom. So, I don't know, you've written 7 or 8
and
books
many more,
here.
and I'm going to come out with another brain book focusing on caregivers, mainly spouses, and even the whole family, too, because it's hard for kids,
This is about all the stuff John should have done, it really is what you're saying? Okay.
Exactly.
And even kids, because they see mom struggling, and she's, it's hard for her to, do simple things like cook, and even doing dishes, you have to stop periodically through because the sound of the water, the light coming through the window, people talking, the dog barking, it just overwhelms.
All right.
So
Let us know. We'll look forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you. C. Ray Johnson, author of Traumatic Brain Injury and Post-Concussion Syndrome. One about do's and don'ts, a personal journey. Another one about 10 simple steps your doctor may not know that can help you. And the third one about the connection between autoimmune disease, fibromyalgia, and TBI.